Stavanger, na Noruega. So thank you so much, Professor. It's such a pleasure to have you here. E aí eu passo, então, a palavra para, né, tecer algumas palavras, vice-diretor do Cedeplar UFMG, professor Gustavo Brito. Gustavo.
Thank you, Aline. I don't know if you can see me properly.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, you can. Right. Thank you so much. So I'm here representing Cedeplar, and especially Professor Frederico Gonzaga, who couldn't be here today, mostly to welcome Professor Boschma to the seminar. We're very happy to have him as a guest. This is a very long-standing seminar series, which for the last couple of years we have been holding online, unfortunately. But on the other hand, it cuts down transaction costs to have guests from abroad, especially in such important themes which we have been working for the past couple of years. So it's an honor, it's a pleasure. Welcome to Cedeplar. We hope to be able to invite you to be here in person in Brazil very soon, and I'm sure we have many opportunities in the near future. So thank you so much. Thank you, Aline, for organizing the session, and thank you, João, for inviting Professor Boschma. And thank you, all of you, for being here, those who are here in the room, and those watching on the live streaming. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Gustavo and Aline. It's once again a pleasure to receive Professor Boschma. Before passing to him, I would like to give a short presentation of Professor Boschma. He is currently full professor in regional economics at the Department of Human Geography and Planning of the Utrecht University in the Netherlands. He's also professor in innovation studies at the UIS Business School of Stavanger University in Norway. And he holds the Bernard Maris Chair in Economics at the University of Toulouse in France. He has been full professor in innovation studies at Lund University, Sweden, between 2013 and 2017, where he was also director of the Center for Innovation Research and Competence in the Learning Economy, CIRCLE. Boschma has been member of the Scientific Advisory Group of the European Commission, DG Regional and Urban Policy between 2018 and 2020, and he's member of the Board of International Regional Studies Association since 2015. He was a member of the Research, Innovation, and Science Experts RISE high-level advisory board of the European Commissioner Carlos Moedas in DG Research and Innovation between 2015 and 2016. He has carried out research projects for the World Bank, the European Commission, European Science Foundation, OECD, the national government of Italy, and for many ministries in the Netherlands, among others. Boschma, together with other scholars, has laid the foundations of evolutionary economic geography, a new influential stream in economic geography. He has published in international journals on regional diversification, smart specialization policy, geography of innovation, regional resilience, spatial evolution of industries, structure and evolution of spatial networks, and on the relationship between agglomeration externalities and regional growth. Boschma has been ranked by Thomson Reuters among the top 1% of cited researchers worldwide in all scientific fields since 2014 on a yearly basis. He has several publications in many prestigious journals such as Economic Geography, Journal of Economic Geography, Regional Studies, and has around 40,000 citations in the Google Scholar. So as you can see, it's a huge pleasure to welcome Professor Boschma here, and we are all very happy and excited to hear his presentation, which will be called Complementary Interregional Linkages and Smart Specialization an empirical study on European regions, which is the title of a recent paper that he published with Professor Pierre Balland in Regional Studies. But I believe he will also be discussing his research projects more broadly, right? So without further ado, thank you very much, Professor Boschma, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Again, thanks for the invitation. I'm very pleased that I can present my work. Of course, I would have preferred to be there with you, to go to your beautiful country, but unfortunately, as you said, hopefully there will be many opportunities in the near future. Okay, I will start sharing my screen now. Just tell me when it's okay, when you see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. All right. Yes. What I would like to talk about is a number of papers. I would focus most attention on a recent paper that we published, which is on complementary interregional linkages and how they might affect regional diversification. I will refer to a number of empirical studies on European regions I've been involved in myself in the last couple of years. So the two main topics I would like to talk about is, first of all, how regions diversify over time. As we all know, it's quite essential for regions to diversify and to produce new economic activities because in our economies, there's always a process of economic decline and stagnations, and companies and sectors run out of business, and therefore regions have to develop a strong capability to move into new economic activities in order to compensate for these processes of decline in their economies. So I will say a bit on that, and then I will move on to the role of interregional linkages. What I tend to do is to apply a similar framework, which has been referred to as the principle of relatedness or the relatedness framework, because in both type of studies, I would like to show the value added of following that framework. Okay. First, introduction is how do regions diversify over time. As I said, regions need to diversify into new economic activities to secure long-term economic development. That is an absolute essential for the long-term economic development, but we also know that regions differ in their capacity to do so. This means that we have to build an understanding of how regions create new economic activities. And for long, in the literature, in economics, there was a tendency to perceive the emergence of new activities as historical accidents, right? They were considered to start from scratch, to develop from scratch, or it was not even an interesting topic by itself, but you started to analyze those type of activities as soon as they emerged. Well, the literature for long was not very interested. What were the preconditions that would facilitate or increase the probability to develop new economic activities in regions? So what we know now is that new activities do not start from scratch, but they tend to build on local capabilities, and those capabilities might be knowledge, might be skills, might be networks, might be institutions, and those conditions which new activities will be more feasible to develop in a region. So those capabilities, they can provide opportunities for regions to diversify into specific activities, but they set also limits to what can be achieved in the diversification process. Many regions might have the ambition to go into artificial intelligence. Well, very few regions might have the capabilities to do so, right? So this is what this whole framework and this whole literature is after. And that has been referred to as related diversification. And I just visualize it here by a fictitious example of region A that is first specialized in motorbikes, then moves into car making, and then diversifies into car trucks. And as you can imagine, each time this region is diversifying, it builds on existing capabilities that are already present in the region. So in this case, it might be engineering capabilities in general. That is what those three types of activities might have in common. So the competences that you need to do to excel in bikes is still relevant and useful to move into cars. And the competences that you need to excel in cars are still useful and relevant to diversify into the production of car trucks. So related diversification. So it is related to the things that have were already present in the region. And this is very different from the notion of unrelated diversification that is visualized in region B, where you are specialized in textiles, then you move into aircraft making, and then you move into pharmaceuticals. And each time you diversify in this example, you have to build new capabilities from scratch, because the capabilities that are relevant in textiles are of no relevance whatsoever to move into aircraft making, and the same moving from aircraft making to pharmaceuticals. You have to transform the underlying capabilities completely. The capabilities that are already present in the regions are of no value whatsoever to make that happen. So that's why many of the studies I've been involved in with many of my colleagues, they have observed that related diversification is the rule. Of course, that is what you expect. And unrelated diversification is the exception. It happens now and then, but not too often for obvious reasons. So this allows us, this relatedness framework allows us to identify diversification opportunities of regions based on the type of capabilities that are present in a region. And activities are related when sharing similar capabilities, right? So the more related a new activity is to existing activities in the regions, the lower the cost and the lower the risk to develop this new activity in a region. So the relatedness framework, when you apply it empirically, requires two steps in this regional diversification literature. One is you have to develop a matrix for assessing the degree of relatedness between technologies, for example. So you do co-occurrence analysis. So what has often been done when working with technologies is that you do co-occurrence analysis, and you identify the frequency of combinations of technologies on patent documents. Because if two technologies pop up, are mentioned on a patent document, and that happens on many patent documents, so they co-occur at a high frequency on patent documents, those two technologies must have something in common. They might share similar capabilities. Well, if two technologies never pop up in combination on a patent document, then those are defined as being unrelated. They might have nothing in common. They don't share any similar capabilities. And by doing so and applying this type of methodology, you can construct a technology space in which each of the technologies are mentioned here as a node. And if there's a line between two nodes, it means that they are related to each other. If there's no line between two nodes, it means that they are not related to each other. And as you can see, this is a technology space that we built for a number of papers. And actually, you can see there are some clusters in this network in which you have many technologies that have similar capabilities, but there are also many technologies that are more at the periphery of this network. So they are just related to only a few other technologies and not related to any other technology in this technology space. You can also do some nice exercises. Right here, we just colored the technologies and assigned them to main categories that are used by USPTO, by the US Patent Office. And for example, you can see that for computer and communication technologies, you can find a cluster on the right up corner, right? So they tend to be close to each other because what they share is similar capabilities in computers and communication. So it seems to work. But for some technologies, it might be very different, right? For mechanical technologies, for example, the red dots, they're everywhere in this technology space. So it means that they might have something in common with each other, but not too much, because you also find them in other parts of this technology space. So this is already this might be an input that could be useful for the US Patent Office to reconsider the categories and make new categories based on what technologies have in common, and not just assign them to predefined categories as the USPTO is doing right now. Okay, this is just a side effect of what can be done. Okay, and then, okay, so you have a technology space, and then the next step in this relatedness framework is that you develop an indicator of relatedness density. You go to the regional level, and then you can calculate the degree of relatedness of potential entries of technologies to the set of technologies in which a region is already specialized. So you go to the diversification of region and which technologies are more likely to emerge in a region, well, depending on the degree of relatedness with existing technologies in the region, right? So this is what this indicator of related density tries to capture. And then you can you can do many nice things following this type of framework by for example, calculating an average relatedness density. So you can then just which we did for all European regions. This was an assignment by the European Commission, and we also published on that in the 2019 article. And so we wanted just to see which regions have most potential to diversify into new technologies that are not yet specialized in. So we calculated an average relatedness density measure in which you look at, okay, which technologies are missing, which technologies the regions are not yet specialized, which technologies are already existing in the region, and then you measure the average degree of relatedness between the technologies in which you already specialized and the technologies in which you are not specialized. And the higher the average degree of relatedness, the more potential you have to develop new technologies. And then if you use that indicator, then you get a map like this, and you can actually see the more red colored the regions are, the more diversification opportunity they have. I mean, here we use patent data, and here we look at technologies. As you can see, in Eastern Europe, there are fewer opportunities to move into new technologies on average, right? But you can also look and zoom in for particular technologies. Here, for example, this was another assignment we did for the European Commission, and they wanted to see, okay, if we really want to go for, we want to tackle climate change, we think hydrogen technology can make a difference in the future, so we have to develop this technology further because it is still not there's still a lot of room for improvement. If we invest in that, should we invest in every region, or are there some countries or some regions more capable of moving into hydrogen technology, given the capabilities that are already present in those regions, right? So, and then you can see, where are the highest opportunities. So, for example, in this map, you could see that if you would develop it in Romanian regions or Bulgarian regions, it would not make sense, right? Because they might lack the capabilities to move into hydrogen technologies. Well, regions in the south of Germany, some French regions, they are much better equipped to participate and contribute to new technology development in hydrogen. And therefore, you might focus new investment in those particular areas. And this you can basically do this for every technology you might be interested in, right? Solar technology, Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, whatever. It can all be done in this way. So that's one thing. So the other thing that I would like to draw your attention to is also, you don't only want to diversify into new activities, but you also want to diversify into what has been referred to as more complex activities, right? And your group also has already worked on that. We follow the literature by Hidalgo and Hausman that introduced economic complexity indicators. And we built on that, and we used that. Just to be brief on that, activities are considered complex when being unique and when relying on a wide range of very sophisticated capabilities, right? So some activities are more complex than other activities, and that can be calculated in a number of ways. One way is the method of reflection, introduced by Hidalgo and Hausman, but there might be other ways to do that. In fact, there are other ways to do that, but in a way they share the same principle, and that is activities are considered complex when being unique, and they need to combine a wide range of different capabilities. And what papers tend to show more recently is that that actually matters, because the higher the complexity of a new activity, the harder it is to be copied by other regions, right? The higher the economic benefits you might accrue for being specialized in complex activities. And we just finished a paper on that for European regions, and we actually showed that indeed regions that moved more into complex activities that built on related capabilities, they showed the highest gross regional product growth and employment growth for a period of over 35-40 years, right? So it is really essential for long-term economic development, not only to move in related activities, but if you also want to add new complex activities to your economy, you have to do that through related capabilities, and if you are capable to do so, you show the highest economic growth rate. So it's quite essential for long-term economic development. So we also did a recent paper, has not yet been published. We already submitted it to a journal, but it has not yet been published. Also with a number of colleagues, with Pinheiro, with Balangen, and Hartman, who was also working in Brazil, as you know. And we have done a study on European regions, in which we want to see what in which regions are more characterized by potential and actual entries in complex technologies and industries. So and we wanted to integrate that into the debate of regional inequality. So to what extent do low-income regions versus high-income regions score on this? And what we tend to observe all the time is that low-income regions are very close to simple technologies and industries, while high-income regions have many more opportunities to move into more complex technologies because their capabilities allow them to do so. Well, in low-income regions, that is not the case. They have relevant capabilities to move into more simple technologies. So this is just some work here. I summarize here. You can actually see the panels on the top are on technological diversification. The 4 panels below are with respect to industrial diversification. And on the y-axis, you can find the average complexity of actual new entries. And we group regions into 3 categories, right? So on the top left, you see GDP per capita. So we have regions with low GDP per capita, medium GDP per capita, and high GDP per capita. And as you can see, what type of entries they score, you can actually see that the average complexity of new entries is much higher in regions with high GDP per capita than with low GDP per capita. The same, the next panel with technological complexity, the regions that have already high complex economic structure, they are more likely to develop even more new entries with high average complexity. Same as population density. The regions with the highest population density have more capabilities to move into more complex entries, etc., etc. And it's the same as for, it does not matter if you move into technologies or you move into new industries. Also, you can also try to see, okay, what potentials do regions have in Europe? And again, it's the same story, right? So again, the GDP per capita or technological complexity or population density, what you can actually see that the high income regions, they have more opportunities to move into more complex entries, and there's no difference between technologies and industries. So that also makes you think about, okay, what could be policy implications for that, right? So we developed a kind of framework that we also applied here in Europe, in which we map all the opportunities of a particular region and how they score on relatedness on the one hand and on complexity on the other hand. So you map all potential entries in this graph. And of course, when you do so, then policymakers might have a look and say, okay, if I have 2 industries here, industry J or industry I would probably go for industry J as a potential entry because it has a higher degree of relatedness with existing industries in the region, and it will add more complexity to the region, which will bring higher economic benefits. So if you have to choose between the 2, it's better to go for industry J instead of industry I. But that depends very much on the type of capabilities that are present in the region. Not all regions have the same capabilities to do so. All regions have their own history, are specialized in specific industries. So here we developed that for smart specialization, and you can see 4 quadrants, right? What you, of course, if you have diversification opportunities in the right upper quadrant, low risk, high benefits, right? It means that you can really rely on relevant capabilities. They're already present there, and you could move into high complex activities, which of course is great, right? Low risk, high benefit. But some regions just have opportunities to diversify in the lower quadrant on the right. Low risk, low benefits. So there are still relevant capabilities, but it will not add that much complexity, right? So low benefits. The more risky strategy would be in the case on the left up quadrant, right? So high risk, high benefits, right? So you have not that many relevant capabilities around on which you can build to develop new industries or new technologies. But if you succeed, you will accrue high benefits because they add complexity to your local economy. Well, of course, the worst thing that the policymaker could do is to go for the left low quadrant, high risk, low benefits. You have no capabilities whatsoever to move into that. And if you succeed, then it would not add that much complexity to your region. So that is better not to follow this type of strategy. But as I said, it depends very much from region to region. What kind of opportunities do you have? Here I mapped just for Ile-de-France, the Paris region. Again, you see the same figure, right? Relatedness on the x-axis, complexity on the y-axis. And now I just mapped all the sectors, all the industries for the Ile-de-France region. If RCA stands for a relative comparative advantage, if it's above 1, let's say that you are specialized in that industry, right, as Ile-de-France. And if you're an RCA lower than 1, it means you're not yet specialized. So those might be potential entries. And as you can see, Ile-de-France is one of the richest regions in Europe for very good reasons, because there's a positive line between relatedness and complexity. So it has the highest potential in the most complex activities, and that will bring the most economic benefits. And that's why Ile-de-France is rich. Now look at Silesia, an old industrial region in Poland, right? Old coal mining regions, steel making region. There you have a completely different situation, right? The relation now is negative. So you have most potential in low complex activities. So this is a common pattern that we find in many old industrial regions in Europe. They have opportunities to diversify, but it will not add that much complexity to their economy with economic consequences. And then we have a peripheral region like Extremadura in Spain, right? It's just in the middle of Spain somewhere, a typical peripheral region. And as you can say, the relatedness scores are very low, so they have almost no potential in any sector. So what to do with a region like Extremadura, right? So this is just to illustrate how different regions are, how different the type of capabilities they have produced over time, and what kind of consequences that has for their diversification opportunities. So it is an unequal game, and of course policy has to adapt. And smart specialization policy in the European Union has to develop a policy that is very customized and geared towards the specific needs and capabilities that are present in the region. So there's no way you should apply a one-size-fits-all policy. Right? So now going to the interregional linkages, because so far I've talked about the role of regional linkages, like the regions and the capabilities that are present. As I said, they define opportunities, but they also set limits to what you can achieve in this diversification process. But so far, I treated all regions as kind of isolated entities, right? As if they do not interact with other regions. And of course, we know that they do in practice. So you have to account for that, and you have to try to incorporate that into the relatedness framework I was talking about before. So interregional linkages might be important, if only to avoid a process of lock-in that can happen at the regional scale, right? That you become specialized and focused and inward-looking, and you're not capable of moving out of that. Then interregional linkages might be a way to expose yourself to outside information, things like that, and might enhance your diversification process. But the big question, of course, is, can interregional linkages provide access to missing capabilities? Yes, they can, but is there not a sort of capacity needed in order to understand the external knowledge that you might get access to? Because you have to understand external knowledge. So not all interregional linkages will matter for a region to diversify in, but you need to have a sort of capacity to exploit external knowledge. So that means that you have to get access to non-local knowledge that needs to be related to local knowledge. And this is something that has been taken up also in smart specialization policy very recently, although still very little attention is attached to that. So if we identify diversification opportunities of regions, it's not that we only have to look at regional capabilities, but also on the nature of interregional linkages. And this is the paper that we just published in Regional Studies last year. So our main claim was that regional diversification depends not on external linkages per se, but what matters are those external linkages that provide access to capabilities in other regions that the region is lacking, of course, but at the same time are related to existing capabilities of the region, right? So we had to develop an indicator to measure that and to assess that effect. So we estimated a regional diversification model, an entry model that is quite common in this literature. We used pattern data from the OECD RegPat dataset. We could distinguish between 654 technology classes. We had data on 292 European regions. This is the AU 27 plus the EFTA countries like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. So our dependent variable is quite common, right? It's an entry model, and so what we look at is an entry of a new technological specialization in a region. So the relative technological advantage should be higher than 1 in a window of 5 years. So we covered a period, quite a long period from 1992 to 2016, and we constructed 5 years windows in which we said we looked at all regions that were not yet specialized in technologies, and that is our population. And then we wanted to see whether those technologies entered or not in a region, and by building up a new specialization in that region, right? So there should be substantial present in that region when we refer to that as an entry in a region. And then we first developed a relatedness indicator in order to proxy the effect of regional capabilities. So we defined relatedness to existing technological specialization in a region. So as I said, you need to do two steps, right? First of all, we developed a measure of relatedness by doing co-occurrence analysis of technologies on patent documents. Then you could create such a technology space I showed before. And then the next step is to develop a relatedness density indicator in which you assess, you measure the degree of relatedness of all potential new technologies to the set of technologies in which a region is already specialized. Now we go to the variables that we are interested in, right? We calculated 2 measures of interregional linkages. One is just interregional linkages per se, right? So you just measure the number of ties a region has with inventors in other regions. So these are co-inventor linkages, right? So and we just count the number of ties. And then our main variable of interest is complementary interregional linkages, which is more about, what kind of, how much relatedness density can you add to existing relatedness density by linking to regions where you can tap into knowledge you have not, that is missing in your own region, but that is related to to the specializations that you already have. So you take 2 steps. First, you calculate a relatedness densities that all regions J can potentially add to the relatedness density of a region I in developing a new technology T. And I just illustrated that. I illustrate this in the next figure. When you have this relatedness on the x-axis, right? There's complexity on the y-axis. Here you have a region that wants to develop a new technology I. It has already, let's say, 50% of all related technologies present in the region. But if it would connect to region B, it could add 30% relatedness density to the 50% it already has. If it would connect to region C, it would add 20% of the relatedness density to the 50% it already has, etc., etc. So you can calculate for each technology in each region how much other regions in your database can add to the relatedness density in that particular region for that specific technology. And then, of course, you control for the actual links between region I and all region J, because the relatedness density that can be potentially added is just a potential, but you can only exploit that when you have established actual linkages through co-inventor relationships between the regions involved. So here we have outcome, relatedness density, of course, proxy, right, for capabilities in a region. It's always positive and significant, having a positive effect on entry of technological specializations in a region. The number in model 2, number of interregional linkages is added, right? You can see that's a positive effect. So the more interregional linkages you have, the higher the probability that you will develop a new technology specialization. But then there's a model 3, we have our main variable of interest, right? Complementarity of interregional linkages, and you can actually see it as a positive and significant effect. Well, the number of interregional linkages, that variable turns into a negative coefficient, right? So meaning that it does not really matter how many interregional linkages you have. You have to develop the right interregional linkages. That means that are complementary to the capabilities that are present in your own region, right? So it says that building interregional linkages comes at a cost, and only with a cost if you don't connect to the right regions that can provide complementary capabilities. Then in model 4, we also calculate the interaction term between relatedness density and complementarity of interregional linkages. And you can actually see it as a positive and significant coefficient, meaning that the two go together, right? So they reinforce each other. So the higher the relatedness density, the more the effect of the complementary of interregional linkages. So it's not, those are not substitutes, right? So it's not that when you have when you miss certain local capabilities, that you can compensate that by establishing complementary interregional linkages. No, the two go together, right? So if there's a positive, a significant coefficient here. Well, you can use this information, and this is also what we did for the European Commission, is again going back to my hydrogen technology, right? So I had the map before. Let's go back there. Here I showed first the regional capabilities, right? Which regions are strong in the type of capabilities to move into hydrogen technologies. And now you can, Ile-de-France is somewhere, in the north, in the middle. And now I want to see, so you could see that Ile-de-France did not have too many capabilities to develop new hydrogen technologies. So I made now Ile-de-France region, I made it black. And now I want to see what other regions could mean for Ile-de-France regions to move into new hydrogen technologies, given the complementary capabilities they have elsewhere in Europe. So this could already be very insightful, could be very informative for Ile-de-France to develop a smart specialization policy when they would like to prioritize new hydrogen technologies, and they could see, hey, we have a number of capabilities that are needed ourselves, but other capabilities that are required can be tapped by making linkages to other regions. And here are the most relevant regions mapped for Ile-de-France regions to compensate for the capabilities that they are missing themselves in hydrogen technologies. So, for example, this already shows that there are already quite some French regions they could connect to in order to get access to complementary technologies, right? In order to make them diversify successfully in hydrogen technologies. So Macron could develop a French strategy, but they could also opt for connecting to German regions, especially in southern part of Germany, but also the region of Copenhagen has very strong capabilities in that respect. So this is just a way of showing to whom they could link and with whom they could develop strategic partnerships if they really would like to go for new hydrogen technologies, right? Not only rely on the existing capabilities that are present in the regions, but also try to see where you can find partners that you could collaborate with in order to develop this new and promising environmental technology. Okay, my last words, and then I stop because I'm maybe already talking too much, is that we should not underestimate the role of institutions because the institutional context might have a real big impact on whether smart specialization policy might be actually very successful, right? So you might have the right set of capabilities, you might make the right connections to other regions, but still you might fail to diversify because your institutions might not be appropriate to do so. Well, there are many studies that have looked at the institutional context between regions. The institutional context differs to a considerable degree. Of course, it depends on national institutions, the degree of political autonomy. European regions has their huge differences in that respect. Entrepreneurial culture differs, bridging and bonding social capital. We have done some papers on that. They might have an effect on the ability of regions to diversify. But also, I think that will be my last slide, the quality of government that are available in the region. So there's a nice data set made available not that long ago by colleagues of mine in Sweden, and they have developed an index of quality of government, which is an index of many variables that try to capture how local citizens in regions assess all kinds of public services, like the public service in teaching and education, police services, health services, etc., etc. And citizens in all those regions can just assess, and they can express their opinion whether they think those public services are right or not. And the more blue the region is, the higher the quality of government. Also, part of this index, there's corruption, for example, and you can see there are also many regions that are colored in red, which have a low quality of government. There's a lot of corruption there, which of course has implications for whether your smart specialization will be effective or not. Because smart specialization policy is a non-size-fits-all policy, as I said before. So you have to involve local stakeholders. That is the whole idea behind smart specialization strategy. But will that really happen, and will that materialize? Will that be activated in a region where you have a higher degree of the corruption, or where the quality of government is actually very low? There, of course, it's very challenging to have an effective smart specialization policy. And I think we are currently doing research on that, and indeed, our results show that that is not easy to accomplish. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Boschma, for this great presentation. I would like to open for questions from the audience.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I think you can stop sharing.
Okay.
But before we take some questions, there are a couple that I would like to pose. we have been carrying out some similar work here applied to Brazil in terms of diversification and thinking of relatedness and policy. And there are two things that I think maybe could be explored a bit more. And I would like to hear your comment and to hear maybe if you're carrying out some research on that. First one is in terms of the interregional linkages, because this recent paper of yours, you're thinking of the positive effects that regions might have between each other. But if we think in terms of Myrdal, for instance, and the positive and negative effects that might exist, it could be that specialization in one industry in a particular region could harm the development of the similar industry in another because of competition effect or something like that. Have you already taken a look into that or run some tests also? And do you think this is how relevant this is, or if the positive links are more relevant? And a second question related to this one is also thinking in terms of policy and how to select the best industries to diversify into. If you think in terms of centrality, of central place theory, it could be that some characteristics of the regions might lead to these regions to be more prone to diversify into some industries and not others. Even maybe they're related to these industries, but they're not that central, so this would not be a good option. So yeah, I would love to hear your comments on this, and then we open to the questions that the students might have.
Yeah, thanks very much. They're excellent. I just for clarification, what do you mean exactly by central? Regarding your last comment.
Oh, because there's Kristaller's theory of central place theory that some industries they're more central, so that they're localized in larger cities, and there's a recent paper by Pierre-Alexandre Balland, I think, that showed that complex activities tend to concentrate in large cities, which I think is related to Kristaller's approach to central place. So there's this hierarchy of cities of different sizes. And for instance, if we think in terms of the health system, right?
Yeah.
Some services are only provided in large centers and the small ones. So.
Yeah. No, excellent comments. Let's start with the last one. I think that is the paper that I showed with Pinheiro et al. Actually making that point, right? So we have this indicator also of population density, right? So we actually see that indeed the regions that have highest population density, so the most urbanized one, they have a more capacity to move into the most complex activities that you can think of, no matter whether those are technologies or no matter whether there are industries. We also have looked at jobs, things like that. So this is very much connected to the paper that you referred to by my colleague Pierre-Alex Balland and David Rigby, who showed that indeed cities tend to concentrate on the most complex activities, right? So this is also kind of part of the definition of complexity, which you need to combine a lot of capabilities that you can only find in the larger cities, right? So and there are more opportunities to combine them because they are available in those locations. So I think that is perfectly in line with what we find as well. I think your first question is a very interesting one that we still have to explore, right? So we know that from other literatures, right, that of course there are competition effects, right? So we tend to assume that, okay, you can add as many things as you want, right, as long as they're related to what you have. But of course, the reality is much more complex in that respect. So it might be the case that indeed there are competition effects, and when you link to other regions, right, you might be confronted with more competition, and therefore you might be harmed by that. So I can see that this type of literature is really open to this type of new questions. Those are not new questions, right? These are old questions, but we have to incorporate them into this relatedness framework. So we did already some papers on where we said, but that was more on when we used the notion of skill relatedness, right? So you define skill relatedness when there's a high intensity of labor mobility between industries. So, and then we always made the claim that, okay, if you have a lot of skill relatedness present in a region, they will benefit from each other, right? So there will be knowledge spillovers, things like that, blah, blah, blah. That was always the kind of argument that we made. But at the same time, you might also think about the competition effect, right? So because they are skill related, they also compete with each other for scarce labor, right? Because they use more or less similar people with similar skills. So the more skill related you put together in a region, the more competition will there be among them. And that might not always go to the benefits of all the skill-related industries that are present in the region. To me, it's an empirical question, right? So what do we see and what do we find? Do we still find a positive effect? But you're absolutely right. I mean, we can do much better. I mean, I just published one paper with a Norwegian colleague, in which we looked at the Stavanger region in Norway, oil region, and there you have a big oil sector, and then we wanted to see whether that the skill-related industries to oil in the region would be harmed by being close to such a powerful sector, because also the oil sector can offer much higher wages, right? So skill-related, instead of being close to other skill-related industries where you might benefit from, we actually found that those skill-related industries are harmed by being close to such a big. Okay, then the oil sector might be an exceptional case, right? Because they pay so high wages, right? So it might not be true for all skill-related industries. But anyway, there is this competition effect that you talked about before, right? So indeed, I think that it's really would be actually perfect to take that up in future research to know more about it.
Gustav?
Yeah, plus. Right. Thank you, Professor Boschma. Thank you, João. I have two questions. I obviously find your presentation fascinating, because we have been working with related issues for a while now. But I would like to pick your brain about two things which are related to your papers, but maybe not directly. The first one is about your personal experience dealing with the public sector or maybe international institutions regarding policies and actionable steps which they can take. Our experience is that people are really interested in the output of the research in this area, but then in the end of the line, it seems that there is a little bit of a disconnection between research or the research results and proper policy. And sometimes it's a matter of language, a matter of culture, different cultures between these institutions. But I think we have a lot of learning to do on our side, jumping from research results and actually saying something that can be used by these institutions, be they in the city level or regional level or government level. So I'm very interested to know about your personal experience. This area can produce fascinating results, and how to help institutions to take the next step and actually transform these results in policies. This is the first one. The second one is that a lot of the visibility of the studies, many studies in many different sub areas, actually enjoyed a lot of exposition because of visualization tools. I'm thinking about obviously all the effort by the MIT Data Lab. We also have here in Brazil our own Data Viva, which shows data on economic complexity and other issues. And again, it's an interesting part of the puzzle, because it, if well done, it can show very complicated information. I'm trying not to use the complexity word again and again. Very complicated information to a large number of people. But then again, there's another disconnection between being able to visualize all the information and actually using this information to do something. And usually I'm thinking about the private sector, actual enterprise and companies, and also the public sector. And again, I would like to, if you can have some words on your personal experience with these tools and what they can actually provide now and in the near future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again. Excellent remarks. Yes, I've been working with policymakers for quite a long time now, and trying to use this type of language and make them convinced that, or at least communicate that to them, and then hopefully they will become enthusiastic about it. And I must say I'm quite positive. I'm not going to say that I will solve all their problems, and if they just follow our type of work, that the world will become a better place. That's not the case. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. But to be honest, I think we should also count our blessings, right? In a way that if we show this kind of diversification opportunity maps, right, that I showed before, policymakers, I mean, okay, you don't really need to go into the methodology, right? So because it is quite complicated, and what I've learned is, of course, as a researcher, you would like to show your brightness, but that is not what is at stake when you talk with policymakers, right? They must feel that it is useful, and that they can connect, and that they can recognize things, and then they go along with you. So if I explain this kind of studies, I mean, for example, I just did a study for the Rotterdam Harbor, one of the biggest harbors in the world. And so they were thinking about how to move on, right? How to move and incorporate new challenges, like they're talking about smart shipping and things like that. And I use this type of framework, and I can really provide them with really detailed information. What are their opportunities in that respect, and to what extent there are on the frontier, or they are behind, things like that. And these data can actually show that. And then I present that to them, and then they recognize things, right? So they might say, "Hey, you're right," and now we finally see that you can actually measure it, right? What we always thought. Or they say, "Hey, we didn't know that. Yes, we had some idea, but apparently, yes, we have to increase our efforts." If I can show them with what type of organizations they should collaborate outside their own region, they have never really thought about that, right? So you also open up their eyes, and this is what I think it's all about. To me. I'm not going to tell them what they have to do. I'm going to present to them what kind of information came out of my own research. And I just bring that into discussion with them, right? I just present that as opportunity they might consider when developing their new strategies in the near future. I'm not going to tell them what they have to do. I'm just providing them the information. And then it's up to them what they would like to do. If they want to follow a very risky strategy, which goes against what I would probably suggest, fine for me, but all my data will tell them that that is a very hard road that they will take, up to them, but then they know, and that they have to make additional policy efforts to make that happen. Well, if they go more for the low-hanging fruits, maybe it's more feasible to do, and therefore they will be more likely to be successful. But that can be many things, and it's up to them to decide. For me, it's just about providing them with information, and then it's for local stakeholders to take that up. I'm not a central planner that tells them what to do.
Sure, yeah.
Just provide them with all the information. The same with the complexity indicator, right? As we know, the complexity indicator, as you said, is complex by itself, and it's hard to communicate to policymakers. I mean, of course, they would never grasp the whole calculations behind that, but that's not necessary. You have to tell them the idea, what is behind it, and you have to show them empirical evidence, like many recent papers show, right? That if you go into more complex activities, that it actually you might benefit from that, economically speaking. So in that sense, you have to try to convince them, but there is always an issue about when you also talk with policymakers. Not all of them might be very happy about what you present, right? Because what we know, also there are vested interests, right? That maybe would not even like to see any change at all, right? So
Sure.
so they might say something bad about your research, only to make sure that their own vested interests are secured.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. With just a small comment, a quick comment is that ironically, going for the low-hanging fruit in Brazil is literal. So when you're talking about diversification and commodity prices are going up, there's a huge risk that we'll be growing oranges and soybeans forever and exporting to whatever, the US or China. So this it's a huge challenge to, even if within simple indicators which can be easily visualized, to show the cost of not doing anything in the medium to long run. It might be very profitable to keep on growing oranges and soybeans right now.
No.
But maybe in a couple of years, you might be in a tough spot, in a hard situation. But it's a challenge that we have been facing for many decades now.
Right. Now, so I mean, we are now developing papers on low complexity traps, right? So that you cannot really move into higher complexity products because you're trapped in the low complex ones, because your capabilities do not allow you to move into the more high complex ones. So and that has also consequences for the type of policy you need to develop. Also, that if we can really show this type of traps, I think it can be really useful for policy to think about and discuss that with them, right? So how make sure that you develop out of that trap? That is not easy to do. So you really have to think deeply about how to do that.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have one question from the YouTube chat from Professor Fernanda Silva from the Federal University of Ouro Preto here in our state. Her question is like, Professor Boschma, one of the great challenges for studies involving regional economic resilience, relatedness, economic complexity is to introduce macroeconomic variables. Consequently, macroeconomic issues have been little discussed in these studies. At the same time, it is very important to consider macroeconomic variables, especially for emerging countries like Brazil, which has gone through a process of reprimarizing of its exports agenda and is very susceptible to variations in the exchange rates, interest rates, international economic cycles, etc. Poorly managed economic policy has deleterious effects in the short run, medium, and long term, affecting education, investment, funding of science, innovation, technology, etc. Professor Boschma, could you give your opinion about the role of the difficult difficulty to introduce macroeconomic issues on the regional industrial studies, especially in terms of empirical estimates?
Yeah, well, yes, good question. Of course, those are. I don't think so far we have a lot to say, right, on this, I mean, monetary policy or financial policy, or of course those are important, right, and might affect our results. So there's now also a tendency, at least in the US, in Europe, that interest rates might go up, right? So and that this will have consequences, right? So on yeah, what is possible and what is not possible in terms of diversification, but it also yeah, applies to many other variables that might affect that, like trade policy, things like that. So there are all issues that should be taken on board, but they of course, those type of policies are taken more at the national and the international scale. In Europe, I mean, we don't have monetary policy anymore in our countries, but that is outsourced to the central bank in Frankfurt. So we even don't have any influence on that as a country, as my country in the Netherlands. Although we would like to, because we want inflation is going up. We want interest rates to go up in order to calm that down, but that's not possible because there's no European consensus on that. And the same for trade policy and things like that. So yes, it is important. The type of studies we do is we try to measure these type of variables at the regional scale, but yes, of course, the ones that the national policy or international policies might have an effect on those. I did some studies in the past on national institutions. For example, I did a paper on varieties of capitalism, which is more, these are really micro economic variables, right, that you include, and those have an effect on the type of diversification that takes place. Just paper I published in Research Policy in 2015, which was taking into account to what extent liberal market economies and coordinated market economies are, what type of diversification behavior they showed, and there was a remarkable differences between the two types of institutions. So yes, those are very important, and I think there will be good reasons to include them as well. Yes.
There's also the challenge of trying to measure how these macro impacts could have different impacts at the regional level, right? Because if the impact is the same, then it would not alter very much the implications of the regional perspectives, right?
Yeah, some industries might be more exposed to export, right? So therefore trade policy is very important, but also monetary policy in that respect. So well, in other sectors that might be less relevant. So yes, can have an impact, absolutely.
Okay, is there any other questions? Well, I think if there are no further questions to Professor Boschma, we have now almost an hour and a half of seminar, so we could finish. I'd like to thank Professor Boschma once again for his time, to taking this time in his busy agenda to come here virtually and talk to us and discuss these issues. I think it was very interesting. I think the students, everyone participating, have enjoyed a lot. Thank you very much, Professor.
thanks again for the invitation. It was really a pleasure, and hope you find it useful. And let's continue the discussions, right? Because what I really liked about this type of invitations, right, that I was not even fully aware of the type of research that you were doing, right, and it was so close to what I've been doing myself. So this also gives me a good incentive, right, to become more familiar with that, because that, of course, this is what we as scientists should do, right? So
right. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and you have a great day.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye, everybody.